welcome to another episode of the Storied Way Perspective. Today on the show is a very special friend. I have known her for nearly 20 years and I admire her so much for her storytelling that I find it very difficult to put her into one panel. Because you see, Rohini Vij can speak about all the panels that we have along the Storied Way. So it's unfair to really put her in one and not get to hear her speak about what she thinks about all the other topics and all the other themes that we have in the Storied Way. Rohini will be joining us on the panel where we talk about storytelling as an enterprise. But before that, today in this chat, I speak to her extensively about how she built her career in storytelling, how she began her storytelling journey, and at what point did she realize that she could build a career or she could build an enterprise around it in the small town of Kanpur. We also speak about storytelling and how teachers can benefit from it, how it is an essential skill for children, and what happens when children grow up to be storytellers, what happens to parents and educators when they use storytelling while working with children. We also speak about using stories and storytelling in the classroom, and as trainers, we share notes on how we feel, what we feel, or the resistance that we feel from schools and educators from time to time, and how do we want to address that together as trainers, each one doing their own bit for teachers in this country today. Rohini also shares very valuable inputs for all aspiring storytellers, all individual storytellers, particularly the ones who are looking at building a career around storytelling. So listen to this conversation, listen to Rohini. She's a wonderfully articulate, beautiful person with wonderful ideas, and I'm looking forward to having her back in the panel. But for now, enjoy her perspective and see what she has to say today. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Storied Way Perspective with Rituparna. And today I have a very special guest, a fellow storyteller, a fellow entrepreneur, and a long-time friend who I have known for nearly 20 years now, long before both of us became storytellers. Thank you, Rohini. Thank you for coming, and thank you for agreeing to give me this interview, number one, and thank you for agreeing to come on our panel at the Storied Way.
Thank you so much, Ritu, for having me. It's always an honor, and I think we all inspire each other, and you are a huge inspiration for all storytellers, me included.
Don't say that, because I want everyone to know that while we are colleagues in the same industry, Rohini and I went back to our post-grad college at the same time. She a batch younger and me a batch senior. And then we walked our own ways. We did our own thing after college. And then when I landed up in the world of storytelling, particularly when I started working as a children's storyteller, the first name I hear is Rohini Vij from Nutspace. And what a delight it was to know somebody who you've known a little while earlier, and knowing that, oh wow, Rohini also wasn't a children's storyteller. How did she begin? So let me ask you that question today, Rohini, and for everyone, all storytellers who could begin their careers or who have become their careers, and they're sort of navigating this whole space of what it means to be a children's storyteller today. Tell us about your journey.
So, like you said, that I wasn't a storyteller for children, and I went into it later. So it all started, I'll take you a little back to where it sort of started. Of course, I always felt very close and connected to stories. And in my growing up years, I had sort of an active supply and dose of stories from my parents, grandparents. But I also, in my growing up years, loved to perform. So, I think somewhere it was always there in me to perform. And I hadn't really realized what is it that I want to do. So, of course, I was, doing different things. I started my career with public relations, and then I went into publishing. That's where I really got introduced to children's books, interacted with authors, attended events, literary events, organized events, and got my first exposure to stories. And I felt very closely connected to them. And I also found myself naturally telling in events when I wasn't the main teller, So I thought that, okay, this is something that I like, I enjoy, but I never considered it as a career option.
And this was which year? It's important to note the year.
2007, I was working with Scholastic India. And I worked there for a couple of years. I was handling their marketing and, their PR. And that's when my interaction with authors was very close, because I was organizing book events, book launches. I was traveling with authors, school visits. So all that was happening. And like I said, I wanted to be from behind the scenes. I wanted to jump to, being the one delivering it. But of course, I didn't feel confident enough. And I also thought that, okay, that's nice. It's nice. Okay, so that was what it was limited to until then. Then after publishing, I switched for a little bit, and I joined the corporate sector. I joined Jindal SAW, their CSR wing, Swayam, which is working towards, making public infrastructure accessible. So they had this huge conference coming up, and an international conference called Transit, where people from around the world were traveling, people with disabilities were traveling to India, getting together and talking about public infrastructure becoming accessible. Too many stories, and we were as a team traveling across the country, accessing, figuring out that how accessible our public infrastructure is, conducting access audits, and all of that. And that's where, I realized I love to tell these stories. Each time I would come back, I was full of stories. And every time we would have a team meeting, I would be the one relating the story. Little did I realize I was doing storytelling then as well. And then, we decided to have a family, and we were blessed with a boy. And my husband is from the film background, like he was into filmmaking. So up till then, both of us were like sort of finding our own careers. He was making films, I was doing what I was doing. So we decided to come together and maybe move, for a little while for family support to Kanpur. And then we had this thing that we're going to go back. Once our son is, well settled, 3, 4 or 4, we'll go back to our old lives. And when we came here, for a little while I was really busy with him and everything. And then I realized when it was time to step out, there are just no avenues. There's nothing over here. Where do I take my child? To a mall? I didn't want to do that. And bookstores, there were traditional bookstores, more with textbooks than storybooks. There wasn't really an outlet. And that's when I got this idea, because I had seen, how my son responded to stories. I would tell him a story, I would perform for him. He was a ready audience with a ready applause, So I said, okay, this seems to work. And I got this thought that, okay, let me just try this. Let me just try telling stories to a couple of kids I knew. Back then I didn't know too many people in Kanpur. I was fairly new myself here. So they all gathered at my place in the basement, and we did a storytelling session. There were 7 people, 7 mums with their kids who came. And they were very happy with the session. But then as soon as the session got over, so I said, this is what the plan is. And this is the course, how it's going to be offered. There'll be 12 classes, and this is going to be the fee. And these are the outcomes, because, I was enthusiastic and I wanted to tell them that, okay, these are the outcomes and this is what will happen when you listen to a story. All my research was in place. And they said, wait, are you telling us you're going to charge us for telling stories? So I said, yes, that's the idea. This is a class, a story class, So I remember, those expressions of a couple of 4 out of those 7 mums agreed to give me a chance. But 3 said, no way, we are not going to do this. We can tell stories, we can read books. I saw the shoulders shrugging and saying that, no, this is, not happening. But I think we kept going, with those 4. And then 4 became 10. And, before we knew it, we needed a space to conduct classes. And I think I also realized Nutspace as an organization, my vision started broadening the more experience I, gathered with more experience. So every time I performed for a new audience, I realized that, okay, here's another pain point I need to take care of. Okay, this is another thing we can include. And it took us a while till we realized that our niche lies in content creation with stories at the core, and we are going to build life skills in children using stories. So it took us a while to arrive at it. But I think that journey is important for you to find, where your niche lies.
I agree completely with you, and I sort of resonate with so many of these things that you've just mentioned, Rohini. Beginning with, identifying where and how do you stumble into storytelling. And I asked you the year because 2007. I want everyone to remember that there weren't as many storytellers in India as there are today. Storytelling was not a profession then, was not something, very few people did it. There were some stalwarts in the country, but very few pockets, very few people who were telling stories professionally. And when I say professionally, it means that they charge a fee for being a storyteller. And particularly in a small town, it's also interesting that Rohini's story begins in a city like Delhi and Gurgaon, and she goes to Kanpur to settle down. Rohini, I must tell you that a majority of members in my tribe are from small towns, and being a small towner myself, and you too, you grew up in a small town in Shimla, and I grew up in Jamshedpur. I have a very strong belief that India lives and grows and flourishes in the small towns of the country. And there is a reason why we need to sort of go deeper into the pockets and enable storytellers to feel confident in their sphere and say that it's all right if I want to start working as a storyteller. And the story hasn't changed really. Even now, we still have that. I've gone through that. We're going to charge professionally, blah, 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 all kinds of things. The same narrative is repeated. But today, for a storyteller to sort of use the ecosystem as such and say that I am not the only one, look here, it's an industry. I think that's where we've been able to move in the last several years, right? And I think that's that shift which has happened, and it enables people. From your story, and I also want to tell everybody that we will not talk about Nutspace in greater detail, because Rohini is going to join us as a panelist where we talk about storytelling as an enterprise and how do you build it from beyond a skill, and when you decide that you want to have a career, what steps do you take to make it into a flourishing, sustainable business on another day. But today we're going to still talk about storytelling as a career. So going back to your story and where you stopped it, Rohini, a lot of young storytellers, a lot of new storytellers come up with that dilemma that how do I start charging? How do I offer people something? What do I offer? Because they have never created a children's program before. They have never negotiated with parents to look at themselves as service providers. A lot of them don't even have enough resources to build a program. And I know you build so many beautiful programs for little children and for different age groups, right? So can you give some very easy steps that people can follow, young storytellers can follow to start off?
Right. See, I think there's one thing that I have learned and I've stuck to, and that is that charge from the word go. Yeah. I have never, even when I started, I have very rarely done complimentary sessions. So even if it's a token payment, I have pushed people to appreciate the fact that I'm taking out my time, my energy. And also I think somewhere as an individual, I need to be very confident that I have the ability to make a difference here. So if I'm asking somebody to pay me, I'm not doing anything wrong. I think that's one attitude one needs to change there. So, the first thing is that, yes, so from the word go, you need to decide that, okay, this is what I need to charge. Now, like you said, back when I started, so that time I didn't have anybody to ask that, okay, how much should one charge for a storytelling session, So that's when, from doing the costing and figuring out, okay, calculating my own effort cost and the time and energy that I'm putting into, it's not just that 1 hour that you're going and performing. It's all the homework and research that you're doing. Plus, with your years of experience, all that gets added to it, So it's much more than what you think it is. So first, I think the most important thing would be to appreciate yourself and have faith in your abilities that, okay, I'm going to make a difference here. So if I ask them to pay me, there's nothing wrong that I'm doing here, right? There will be people who will say, but XYZ person is doing it for free. And our teachers, once I went to a school with a proposal and the school said, you are going to train my teachers in storytelling. And I said, yes, but I've been running this school for the last 30 years. All my teachers are trained storytellers. So I said, I'm very happy and the children are very fortunate. Thank you. It was nice meeting you. And I left. But, you have to be willing to let go. Not say, oh, okay, let me do one session for free and I'll prove my worth to you and all of that. I think maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe I was confident. Maybe at times, sometimes I did think that, okay, let me just do it. Maybe, but I didn't know. Somewhere I always made it a point to write it down that no, I will charge. So maybe that helped. That is one, advice that I would give to anybody who's starting out. Believe in what you're taking to them. And the second thing is, when it comes to developing a program, see, one could do it from scratch, from your experience, if you want to do that. But also there are a lot of curriculum developers, content creators who are licensing content, and Nutspace being one. So if you want to reach out to people who've already done the hard work, you can take it and plug and play and add your own, bit to it. So that's a choice you have. And there's so much more to learn now. There's so much more available now. So I guess it's easier, I'm sure.
Yeah. I agree with you completely. Plug and play, watch, learn, adapt, evolve. And most importantly, speak to your target group. Speak to parents, speak to children, speak to educators. Find out from this audience that you want to work with. Try and find out what are they missing, what are they looking for.
Absolutely, very
understand that pain point.
I'll tell you how we decided to start creating, content. So this happened. I used to visit schools a lot. When I moved to Kanpur, I was again approached by Scholastic India. When they figured out that, okay, I'm in Kanpur, they needed, somebody to fill in for some person who had left in their school fair and book club aspect. And they said, you know the product so well, you know the books and all, why don't you do this for us? So I took that up because I needed to step out of the house here. And so I started visiting schools, and Ritu, you won't believe it, every school I would visit, they would offer me a job. And I realized that, okay, the pain point here is good teachers. There is a lack, and that is a gap maybe where I can, step in. So I started offering teacher training services. And I said, how about equipping your teachers to be able to deliver the content? But then there was another problem. Like you said, constant conversation is required. So once I met the teachers, conducted a couple of trainings, I realized, the effect lingers on for a week. You interact with teachers, everybody's really happy to reinvent the wheel and, make everything, storyfy everything and go back into their classrooms with, more enthusiasm and all that. But after one whole week, it wears out, the enthusiasm.
It fizzles so fast.
Yeah. So how do we, that gave me the second pain point. How do we make it, consistent? And how do we ensure that the training that has been delivered is implemented? So I again had a lot of conversation with educators, and they said, okay, you come, you tell teachers how to become good storytellers, you give them stories also, but the timetable is such that they have to follow what they have to follow, and there's no time to integrate what you've taught them. So even unless somebody is really enthusiastic and they might take the pains, everybody else really goes back to what it was. So we realized that how about developing a program that can be integrated into the school and go in with the training as part of that program. So now you're training the teachers, you're empowering them, but you're also giving them a product to play that gets fitted into the timetable. So that is the biggest challenge, because the schools will say, no, we don't want to do this. We don't need it. So I realized that my target group was not the school that thought that, okay, I am here, and I don't need anybody. My target audience was the school who wanted to grow, the school that wanted to learn. So I figured out that so first I made a list of schools, and all the schools that would invite me, to perform and all of that, ironically were not my TG. My TG was actually schools, didn't have enough to pay me, that kind of schools, those kind of schools. So I went to them with my proposal, which was priced according to, what they could pay. And they were willing to give me a chance. So here in Kanpur, there is a school group called NLK Group of Schools. And it's a huge group with several branches. And they were really willing to give me a chance because they wanted their children to genuinely develop an interest in books and reading. And the children who were coming to these schools, all these branches, were children, who were not speaking the language English at all at home. There was no exposure to the language. Plus, the school was, catering to children from not very privileged backgrounds. So, they were very enthusiastic about the program, and we built the program with them. So that's how we would train their teachers. They would integrate it in the classroom. We would handhold the teachers. We saw the teachers grow. We saw the children grow. And when this school hosted a children's literature festival in Kanpur, everybody was amazed because they never imagined that the children would know so much about books. So that love for books, sort of, I've seen that product growing, So I guess you're right, conversation. But I think every experience you have, what is the learning from that experience? If you can integrate that into what you're offering, you will be able to, narrow it down to what it is that is your specialization.
Right. And I think what's important from your story is also, Rohini, to understand that a small town is not a weak market. It is a virgin territory, and I tell this to everyone, you are in a better space where you are the only storyteller, the professionally trained, knowledgeable storyteller who's willing to work hard and create something for that community. It's going to be much cheaper and affordable for any school to take your services than to bring somebody from another town, from another city, from another place where they have to pay for the travel and stay. So use it to your advantage. So you have to find the right things to sort of position in front of the school and say that, look here, don't give me a chance, just let's do this year and let's see where it takes us. I think that that conversation needs to begin with storytellers. And I think there's immense learning from what you just told us about your personal story. Let's talk about storytelling as a skill. And I want to tell everybody that Rohini works with a huge audience, children of varied age groups, particularly the very young. And then she works with educators, she works with parents, she works with storytellers. Now, when we look at storytelling as a skill, Rohini, we know that we are talking about there is a need for people who want to get into storytelling to be trained, to learn it from someone and somewhere, so that they can begin with appropriate knowledge. Let's talk about children. What happens to children and parents and educators when they learn storytelling? We're talking about storytelling as an essential 21st century skill. Do you agree? And if yes, then what happens to them?
I would say that the fact that I got into storytelling is when I saw what was happening to my son when I shared stories with him, So that's what sort of, said, okay, this is great, this is like magic almost, So of course, there are so many benefits of storytelling. And I think more than anything else, so let's take this one at a time. When it starts with children, in terms of their thinking skills, I've seen they communicate better, they make better connections, and they're more empathetic. And I think, when it comes to building social emotional skills, stories are the best, and which is the need of the hour. So of course, there are many other things, communication skills, vocabulary, the language that you choose to tell your story in. So the literary skills will definitely get built. That is a given. But other than that, I think the higher order thinking skills, the logical reasoning, the problem solving, critical thinking that is happening all up here, it's phenomenal. It's amazing, the connections that the children are making. Like you said, I work with very young children. So in fact, we have this program for babies, which is where we call them, and we call it baby boogie, so we dance with the babies. We have music stories, and we expose them to, read aloud, like parents to read aloud for, children. So there was so much resistance because everybody's like, here what happens is, I'm sure it happens everywhere, is that it's not just the mother's decision alone. It's the decision of the family. So she'll say, my mother-in-law is saying, abhi se kyun school bhej rahe ho? Abhi to bachcha paida hua hai. So it's not school is what I'm trying to tell you. It's not school. So I've had sessions where the entire family has sat in the audience to attend a session, So you need to be, again, coming back to advice of be open your doors to everyone, let people sit in your class for them to gain confidence in you and see your passion. So that's one. And then coming back to the effect of stories, then parents, I feel parents connect better with their children if they are telling stories to them. The lines of communication open up. And in the early years, as much as you need to communicate with your child, it is in the adolescent and later years when you need that connection to sustain. And that is an investment that you're making if you start telling stories in an early, at an early stage. And so you'll be very closely connected with your child. Also, your child will not see you as somebody there, because you can share stories of your life with your child, how you made a mistake. And, ever so often I keep telling my son, that, okay, I messed up. And this is what happened. Or when I was a kid, this is what happened. So not just stories about how great I was as a child, but mostly stories about how I failed so many times, and what I did and how I managed to fix it or not. So I think you become more connected with your child when it comes to parents. And when it comes to teachers, it's extremely empowering to be able to tell a story. See, teachers are going through a lot of pressure because they have families back at home, they have their own kids. They also have a lot of pressure, administrative pressure on them. It comes to, curriculum designing, lesson planning, paperwork, executing the class. So they're constantly pressurized, from all angles. So for them to come into that class and those 40 minutes, most of the time there's a lot of baggage that they are carrying, baggage of their own, So when you tell a story, you manage to get rid of that baggage, because at that point you've become one with the story, you've got lost in the story, and in that journey you've got the kids with you. It's a spiritual connection.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, the amount of learning that is happening in the class, I don't think you can sit down and make bullet points of what they've learned. I don't think it'll be enough ever.
But Rohini, I'll connect it with this entire exercise that we as trainers, and I'm sure you also do, and you face this sort of resistance. To be able to tell a story is also we sort of actively talk about, do not moralize, do not talk about the moral, do not dictate, do not try to control how your class will take that story or what will they take away from that story. So we always talk about taking hands-off approach, like tell the story and let the story do its work. Now, do you see a sense of resistance in teachers? And I'm connecting because we have an entire panel on storytelling in the classroom, because there's this sense of being not in control, because teachers, educators feel where they are in control. When they walk in with a topic, they know they have these definitions to give out, they know they have these question answers to discuss, so they know what they want to do. But a story sort of creates that uncharted, unpredictable playing field where anything can happen. Any child can interpret the story whichever way, and the session may go completely out of hand, and they may not land up teaching the concept that they want. Do you see a sense of fear in educators as far as using stories in the classroom is concerned?
Not fear as such, but yes, there is certainly resistance in not telling what the intent of the story is, because I think I don't know, maybe because it's just been the way it has been, that the moment you tell a story, you'll be like, okay, moral of the story is this, or this is why I'm telling you this story, so that's there. But I think what I've sort of taken the middle path. I don't know if it seems to be working, Ritu, is that when you choose a story, what has it done for you? So I've picked up a story and with the purpose of teaching a particular concept, it may be a STEAM concept. So I've read it and I know that I've picked it up because it's explaining the concept really well. But what else is it doing for me? So, list it down. What are the takeaways for you? I think that's very important. If you are convinced that these are the takeaways, when you're delivering the story, you will be able to deliver those takeaways, So you can be in control of the story. Because I think a story is delivered the way you interpret it.
Yeah.
I may interpret a story in a different way, and I may focus on a certain thing that is resonating with me more.
Yeah.
So I think I've not seen so much of a resistance, but I feel what has worked is that if I outline that, okay, this is what the purpose of the lesson is, it seems to work as a first step. Where I'm not saying that, okay, give out the moral of the story or, say this, but I've picked this story because I feel that this is what it is conveying. And then once I've onboarded them, once they've got a taste of it, then they're more open in the subsequent training.
Right.
So I guess hand holding gently is
Hand holding gently. I completely agree. The other thing which I also feel holds teachers back as far as storytelling is concerned is um, this inability to, or this little bit of fear and discomfort to learn something new. So they've been used to teaching in a classroom in a particular way, and then the storyfying or bringing in a story to teach a concept is suddenly like, oh, a new portion which I'm not prepared well, and I may make a fool of myself, or I may go completely out of control. I don't know what will it land up to, and I have to learn how to tell a story. So have you seen any reactions on that front?
yes, plenty. So there are teachers, many teachers who are very enthusiastic and really willing to learn and go completely out. Sometimes they feel inhibited, and especially when they're in the training, they don't want to do all
Perform in front of another teacher.
Yeah.
They're all right with performing in front of children,
but not in front. Yes, absolutely. That fear of being judged, and that's very normal also. So that is there. But there's this one incident I remember particularly. There was this training I was doing in Varanasi in a school. One of our programs was getting integrated. It was part of that program delivery, and a lot of teachers were very enthusiastic, very eager to learn. But there were these backbencher teachers. Okay, there were 2 rows at the back, and they were just not interested. Okay, and they appeared to be the senior teachers. The ones who've been in the school for very long, and they were the ones who were taking the longest tea breaks and walking in really boisterously and making a lot of noise and laughing at all the wrong points and trying to sort of tell me that, okay, you're just a kid and we know what we do and all of that. So at that point, as a trainer, I for a minute felt a little intimidated because these were elderly teachers, and but then I actually said that no, but this is what needs to be done. And then I actually spoke very clearly to them, went up literally like a teacher to the backbenches, and I said that if you're not interested in this, then please leave, because there's no point that you're here unwillingly. But if you're here, then I'd like you to be here. And I think that just made a difference. They all just sort of came back. And so sometimes I feel that if you find a little resistance, maybe if you speak with authority, you will get a listening ear. And also 2 kinds of problems. One is that I'm willing to learn, but I'm inhibited. And the other is I don't want to learn.
Yeah.
So if it is the former one, that's easy to handle, because your training, your exercises, your content, and everything will help them. But if it's the latter, then you just need to confront them. So if they're willing to learn, then they'll get on boarded. If not, then but there's also that pressure that, okay, they've been asked to sit there. Yeah. So, but that's normal.
The one thing which I have always done, as far as, and I know for a fact that I hope a lot of teachers watch this conversation, is that I 2 things which have helped me work with school teachers is coming from a place of understanding that they already are overworked. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of pain, and coming from a place of empathy helps them sort of come to you and say why they are afraid or why they are resistant towards a new thing that they've brought for you. So they often tell me, then I ask them, tell me, why will it not work? What will it take for me to help you to use this? And then, of course, with the ones that you were just talking about, I tell them, yes, let's find 10 reasons why what we are saying it will not work in your school. And then let's find this one reason why it is worthy of being tried. Let's give an honest attempt to make it work. And so with all the reasons why it will not work, and one reason, let's one reason because of which I will try my best to make it work, let's see if it can overcome the others. So a little bit of perspective shift also enables teachers to feel that you are with them. And yesterday I was talking to Sindhu from Orange Slates, and we were talking about how teachers, are they lifelong learners? Do they want to learn? Do they want to elevate their journey as storytelling teachers and use it as a skill? And I asked her a question about what is the story of an unknown teacher. So that as a thought is quite scary for a lot of teachers, isn't it? That no, I would have spent 30 years teaching in a school, and none of my students could think about me when they would have grown up and gone out. but a storytelling teacher will have a lot of high chances that many children will remember you. So leaving your legacy behind, isn't it?
Yes.
That's important. Rohini, I'll take you to the next question, which is about, you touched upon it very briefly, which is about the state of mental well-being. We know that storytelling is extremely cathartic. We know, we've seen the healing powers of stories. We know as storytellers ourselves, we need to tell a story, especially on a day when it's going bad, and how it sort of instantly elevates our moods and we feel wonderful. We have an entire panel talking about the mental well-being. As a storyteller, and because you work with varied communities, would you like to share something about the healing powers of a story and how it enables storytellers, or rather anyone who's telling a story, any practitioner across the board, what it does for them? What has it done for you?
I think it's just telling stories has made me a better person. And I think that is my biggest takeaway from being a storyteller is that I feel that as a human being, I have become more empathetic. I've become more understanding of the emotions of others. So each time I'm telling a story, I'm meeting so many characters, I'm meeting so many different settings and situations, and learning from the mistakes these characters are making these mistakes with them, failing and getting up and gathering myself, and walking again into another mistake yet again. And, so I think it's a journey that one is constantly taking. So like you aptly said, it's very cathartic every time you tell a story. But also, I think it's immensely gratifying to tell a story, and the way it is received is equally important as well. So I go into a class, thinking that I'm going to tell this story, and I go there, and at the spur of the moment, I change the story. I don't know, somehow I feel a very spiritual connect to stories. And if I've gone into a class and I'm or a group of students and I'm telling that story, it's like, okay, this is the story that's coming to me or talking to me today. It's almost as if it's something that I can touch, or I can pull out, and it's tactile almost, and I'm doing it. And then the response I'm getting from the students, immediately the children are, soon after, they want to touch you or talk to you and shower you. Yes, all that is great. It feels amazing. It's very gratifying. But I think that sense of once I've told the story, I don't know, I feel that it's okay. Something's happened, something's changed inside of me. And I've not felt this once, I've felt it each time I share a story. Soon after the story is told, I need at least 2 or 3 seconds to absorb it myself. And I feel that I'm in a position of extreme responsibility when I'm doing this. Because if it's having that effect on me, imagine what effect it will have on the listeners. So I've got to pick my stories very wisely, and I've got to tell them very, very carefully, and be responsible with what messaging I have in mind. I'm not going out to sermonize, but be responsible with what messaging I have in mind. So like I said, it's almost meditative.
Oh yes, I agree. My mother agrees with me. I tell her that I like you, I also say I'm a better human being ever since I started telling stories. And she looked at me and she said, I agree. So, coming from your mother, you obviously know that she sees through you and she knows you very well. I also cringe. I mean, I come from television, unlike Rohini, who has been, with publishing before this. I come from television, and I sometimes cringe to think what would I have become if I had stayed on in television. I would have been a ghostly and a ghastly version of myself, which I shudder to even, I can't imagine, despite my great imagination skills. So I mean, Rohini, you are such a beautifully articulate person, and I love this conversation. As much as I can go on and on and on, I know I'm greedy. I'm going to bring you to you are there in the panel. I'm going to looking forward to listen to you there. And I know anyone who's watching this will also come back to listen to Rohini, where she talks about how she built Nutspace as an enterprise. She's given us a sneak peek into how she built her program and how she started doing it. But what are the steps she took to ensure that this program has a life of its own. There are deadlines, there's a pricing, there is a pitching, and there is a negotiation. And there's a business model behind this whole venture that she has, which is Nutspace. Thank you so much, Rohini. Did you enjoy this conversation?
Oh, thoroughly. Thank you for having me. It was such a delightful chat. And I didn't realize that the time just flew by.
Yes. And I think that happens. It's okay. You get two storytellers to talk. We will only share stories and enjoy it as long as it lasts.
It's been equally enriching for me, Rituparna. There's so much to learn from you. And thank you. It was such an honor to be here and entirely my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to the panel discussion now.
Yes. I do hope you're looking forward to the panel discussion, because I am looking forward to having this conversation. And a lot of storytellers from my tribe, and I'm sure the rest of the community will also like to hear from you, talk about how to build an enterprise around storytelling and how to make it sustainable, and then of course make it profitable. So register for the Storied Way. Our registration is free. There are no tickets, but you must register to come and attend, to listen to Rohini and the other speakers. So until the next Storied Way Perspective, thank you so much for watching.